That I think is an important point, and it leads me to a question that I think I'd love to open this up to everybody, and it is sort of coming through what I'm reading in some of the questions in the chat from the audience. But thinking about how do we engage faculty, like what are the kinds of support mechanisms? We haven't really we've talked about this sort of in an abstract sense, but are there some particular ways that we can better support faculty? One of the things that showed up in those, and thank you to everybody who responded to that pre-survey. One of the things we were trying to understand was where, you see the needs. And there were sort of three areas. That was help me find partners, and how do I support this, from a resource perspective. I think part of what's assumed there is how do we compensate people for the time and the effort. Those were sort of two overarching themes. So I'd love to get a sense of how you would do that. And John, I knew you were about to say something too. So if you were about to respond to the last one, I'd love to, give you that moment. But I'd love to, think about this, how we engage faculty, how we draw, faculty in and support them.
Maybe I can say something that connects tangentially to that point, because earlier, comment was made about scaling this up, or creating more robust virtual exchange initiatives. And this really is an issue, and we're in a strange time now, because it's kind of like gasoline has been thrown on a little ember, and so it's flaming now. I'm not confident, just like when you do a barbecue, that 15 minutes later that flaming won't come down and it will be back to being embers again. And that's because I'm not sure that people are building infrastructure to primarily support faculty, so that the flames keep burning when the pandemic recedes. I think when we actually look at numbers, and I don't want to take too much time here, I did some survey work, it's now a year ago, so it's completely pre-pandemic. But I was looking to see how many institutions had been able at that point, a year ago, to scale up. And I found that in the entire world, as best as I could view, there were only 7 institutions that were able to offer 30 or more COIL courses a year. Now, I'm sure that number has gone way up this year because of this. But if we're making a comparison between what I called 8%, which was probably high actually nationally, of people studying abroad, and then an institution is doing virtual exchange, and let's say 1% of students are doing that, well, you really can't make the case then. You really have to make the case that virtual exchange is reaching 10%, 20% of the students. And that's hundreds of COIL courses or virtual exchange courses. And very few institutions have decided to do that. So, sorry, this isn't exactly about faculty, but it is, because unless faculty receive appropriate support, you'll only get the early adopters and those people with research projects abroad. You'll get a bunch of people who are good to go, and the rest of the people will be onlookers and they won't jump in.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that when we start to get to, how to support, how to scale, if we're going with the sort of diffusion curve model, how do we get to where there's a critical mass where we build a center of gravity? And I think just to tie this together in the presentation, having that infrastructure, having point people, having coordination, having teaching and learning technology centers, however robust or developed those are, but having some of those supports, create a profile. But I think there's another piece of this that is, a normative aspect, making this something that becomes more valued, more standard practice. One of the things that I think we've really tried to do here, and is represented by the partnership between the University System of Georgia, Georgia State, Georgia Tech, Clemson, is this Southeast Regional Virtual Exchange, this coalition that we're working to build. Where we have support, where we have training, where we have peer groups and networks and communities of practice that can really help to bolster that sense of involvement in a community. And so that I think is another way. And I'd love to, we have about 1 minute left in the Q&A. Are there any sort of, brief sort of sticking points or closing remarks that you'd like to bring in? I was open to the panel and John as well.
I'd like to jump in. At the very beginning, Tony, you mentioned that you mentioned your initial interaction with John in coming and working with you, and how that transformed the way in which you thought about what you were doing. And then I don't know whether it was Steve or Wolfgang mentioned that some of their earliest interaction was bringing John to campus to do a workshop for your colleagues. In Clemson's case, we did the same thing. It was not John. We actually brought Jean-Mario Bassana from DePaul University, who is also well into this in his practice and at his institution. And just having a small gathering of inviting faculty and having that informal, this is a large group, keep it to your campus to think specifically about how it could work on your campus, bring in someone with more experience. For us, that was a turning point. We had one session for faculty, we had one session for administrators, and we saw some immediate returns on that.
That's a great point.
I think along those lines, it's, the building personal relationships is key for this, and organizations like Atlanta Global Studies Center, I think, really will go a long way to facilitate that and find these partnerships where you can really bring it home to people on the individual level.
Yeah.
And Tony, to your question about what are the most effective ways of supporting faculty here, of course there are we have had requests for proposals, we've had stipends, we had mobility support. All of that is important. I would just caution, though, that if we want to make this sustainable and we want to set norms that this is expected, we also cannot set up a permanent expectation of support for doing this as something that's extra. So I think we have to be careful to focus on supporting those activities that really need supports. For example, travel to actually meet your faculty partner, things like that. In one thing I just want to mention, we are about to roll out a call for proposals for large enrollment courses, and the support there would be a dedicated teaching assistant who would help manage the virtual exchange activity in that context. I think that could be a good example for making this more sustainable, plus reaching the scaling that John referred to.
Yeah, I think that's critical. And I would also add, and I know we're short of time and I want to turn to Tammy in a moment, but just, from a personal perspective, one of the things that I think, is from a holistic sense, how my engagement, and this is a personal story, I'll take, a minute to just sort of recount, because I think it helps to tie some of these pieces together. I started with a virtual exchange, a class on the psychology and politics of terrorism, was offered several times. We've researched, we've published on it, but even to right now, the network and the experience and the relationships I built in that virtual exchange have carried forward, over the past decade and matured and blossomed to the point where just last week, me and some of the colleagues I met through this process and really reinforced those relationships, we just submitted a multi-million-dollar grant together. So the teaching ties into the research, it ties into the student experience. And I think, I would love for us to think about this holistically, the benefit to the faculty, the benefit to the students, and certainly, it's not isolated to one piece of what we do. And with that, I'd love to introduce Tammy Rosner, who's here on behalf of the University System of Georgia, one of our key partners. I'd love to thank John, Sharon, Wolfgang, Steve, for a great session, a great panel today, to Diana and Kyle as well for, putting this together and working with us. And let me turn it over to Tammy for some closing remarks from the system perspective.
Thank you, Tony, and thanks everyone. This was a great panel. Thanks everyone for your collaboration. And Tony, you did a wonderful job as our moderator today. I want to thank everyone for your engagement and attendance today. I was very excited to see how many people are represented from the University System of Georgia here, which highlights the interest in international virtual exchange across the system at all levels. We have international education staff, faculty, provosts. We have a large range of interests, and I'm very excited to see that. The University System of Georgia has been working to build support and infrastructure to grow international virtual exchange throughout the system. And by including international virtual exchange as one of the many options that USG students have to obtain a personal global education experience, we hope that eventually all USG students can take part. As many of you know, the USG made a commitment last year to International Virtual Exchange by including it in the USG Strategic Plan 2024. Our goal is to increase the number of student enrollments in experiential learning courses, which includes both study abroad and international virtual exchange, to 150,000 by 2024. As Director of International Education, my goal is to have the majority of those experiential learning courses include a global component. And I feel confident based on the attendance today that we can make that happen together. Thanks again, John, Tony, Wolfgang, Sharon, and Stephen. This was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
And thank you to all of you who have joined us today. I hope you will join us for the afternoon session, which begins at 12 o'clock. Please check your email for the Zoom link for the afternoon session. It is a different link than this morning's session. And this afternoon, you will receive an email in your inbox with a short feedback form.